Hello and welcome to On Public Square, a City of Clarksville podcast where we get to know the amazing city employees that help keep the lights on. They're our friends, our family, our neighbors, and each of them has a story to tell. Now, let's say hello.
Story.
Yeah. That's very fair. That's like talking to Mr. McQuarter. I loved his. Well, yeah, I got a job and then I was late the first day. I ran out of gas, so I had to run from Chonies.
Yeah, in cowboy boots.
Yeah, that was. I was upset. Clarksville Now didn't keep my headline on that, which I wrote. Running up that road, running up that hill. Ned McQuarter's story, or not Ned McQuarter's story. They didn't like the reference, but that's okay.
He's a great guy.
He is. I really enjoyed talking to him for that article. But anyways, hello and welcome to another episode of On Public Square. We're your hosts, Casey Williams and Jimmy Settle, and we're here today with some folks from Gas and Water. We have Philip Whittinghill, Chris Cherry, and Carly Summers. And we're here today primarily to talk about a brand new program and grant that the city received called HBFF. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that and how it's going to help people in Clarksville. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Wonderful. And just kind of, if we can, I like to start with just introductions and tell me a little bit about each of yourselves. Can we start with Philip?
Sure, absolutely. Born and raised here. I've been in Clarksville all my life. And my adult life, I've worked for Gas and Water for the past 30 years.
Wonderful. Love to have natives in. I grew up out in Cunningham, so I've been here as long as I can remember. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I'm Chris Cherry. I've been here since 18. I came back in 18. I have a total of about 8 years with the city, and I have about close to 30 years, and it'll be 30 years in October that I'll have in the utility business.
Wonderful. What's your job title?
I'm an assistant manager of water operations.
Awesome. And I meant to ask you the same, Philip.
I'm the plant manager for the water treatment plant.
Wonderful. So y'all will both be at the new facility, I do believe, when it opens.
Well, we'll have two. We'll have the South Clarksville water treatment plant and the North Clarksville water treatment plant. I'm the manager for the South Clarksville. Chris will be over both plants, and then they'll have the same admin structure at the new plant.
We're going to have y'all compete. We're going to get a plant versus plant dodgeball game going.
We're hoping not to go that route. We're hoping to have a complete homogenous group.
Wonderful. We were just talking to CPD, and I was like, next we got to get CFR in and let y'all talk bad about each other. And Carly, could you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm Carly Summers. I'm a grants analyst for Gas and Water. I've been in that role for about a year now. Been in Clarksville since 2017, and prior to coming to the city, I actually worked on green certification program with grants. So kind of actually knew a lot of the people that I do now, that I work with now. So
I helped, I was at the museum when they were going through the green certification program. So I got to help with it and learn a lot about that. I worked for J.D. Richardson with maintenance. So we did a lot of changing light bulbs. And the
museum was great about it. They did fantastic. I think they actually won an award for doing the upgrades. I believe they got a best.
They did. Mm-hmm. Great program, the Green Cert program. If you're a local business owner or anything like that, check that out for sure too. All right, a little cross promotion never hurts. Yeah. Awesome. So today we are here primarily to talk about HBFF. Tell me a little bit about what HBFF is.
Okay, yeah. I'll do that. So it's the Healthy Babies Bright Futures, and so they are a national nonprofit that essentially looks at anything that would promote health of new mothers and newborn babies. And one of their initiatives is to look at lead, whether that be lead paint or lead in the water. So that was kind of how Gas and Water found out about it, is because Healthy Babies Bright Futures put out a grant last November for $15,000, and the grant was to educate communities on lead within water systems. And so Clarksville Gas and Water submitted an application for that grant to help us reach out to the local community, specifically to daycares and our school system, to really address the youngest in our community and to educate them on lead within the water supply and what Gas and Water is currently doing for it.
And I believe, if I'm remembering, I saw 4 cities receive this grant. Us, Flint, Michigan, and 2 others. Yes.
There were. I know one was in Arkansas, and I'm forgetting who the 4th one was, but there were about 400 applicants, and so we were one of the 4 that were selected. So it was really competitive, and we were really happy to have it. That was a fantastic grant for us to get.
Love it. You mentioned daycares and other facilities, so it sounds like we're not so much looking at our city water infrastructure, which as far as I know does pretty well on a lot of these types of mitigation issues. We're looking at helping out private infrastructures in places where children are habitating or spending a lot of time. So this is more helping out businesses. Am I on the right track?
Sort of. And I'll let Chris and Phil talk about this, but this one specifically is looking at children because children tend to have the biggest effects of lead poisoning. It's in their development. It's been shown that they have the worst side effects of it. So that's really why this particular grant was looking at people of a younger age. But it's not the only thing that Gas and Water is going to be doing. This just happens to be one part of it. And I'll turn it over to you guys because we actually have a whole program that we're doing.
So how this ties together with the federal regulation that came out and it was finalized in 2020. And we have public education requirements to daycares and schools in private and public.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any particular areas in our community where this sort of initiative is going to be particularly helpful?
Don't know. We are doing our assessment right now. We're doing our LSL assessment, which is lead service line assessment. We're doing an inventory of everything pre-1988. We're looking at every service line in the system. We're either validating that it was after that date, or we're going out and physically digging up those to know if they had lead or galvanized.
It sounds like quite the job.
It is.
We're not a small city. Do we have like a square footage, like number of miles worth of pipe that we have?
We're at 1,100 miles of pipe, I believe, right now. We're over 80,000 meter connections.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's wild.
It is.
And growing every day.
It is a behemoth.
Yeah. A Herculean effort. Awesome. So that's gonna. Do we have a timeline on it?
So we are actually meeting as a group Monday. It's called a milestone meeting to kick all this off even further above what we're doing in the inventory. So we will start that process of reaching out to public schools, the private schools, and the daycare facilities.
Okay, so we'll be doing more reaching out than asking people to reach out to us.
It's actually in our requirements from the federal law.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we have to, education-wise, we also have to inform by letter. We have to, our CCR, our Consumer Confidence Reports, which come out every year, we have to include that language in it as well.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I know we have connections, it's gas that we have some pretty complex dealings with Fort Campbell sometimes, not water, right?
Not sure. Yeah.
Right.
So the grant application process, we were selected. We were one of, you said 4 cities. Can you tell us a little bit about why Clarksville was selected?
Yeah. So essentially, when the application came out, it was like a lot of grant requests. They don't put a ton of details in there, and so you really have to write to it and explain everything that you plan to do. So I'm guessing that our plan, we laid out our entire plan of how we want to communicate with the daycares, with the school system, how we want to essentially build that partnership early, because this really isn't something that's going to take place in the next 6 months. This is going to take place, going forward for the next few years as we identify and then, reach out. Eventually it will be to homeowners too. I mean, there's a whole list that will go down. And so in communications with them afterwards, they said, that was really important that we wanted to start these communications so early. So I think that probably helped in our application. And it was a pretty fast turnaround. Usually in grant applications, you don't always know right away. And I think we found out about 2 months after we submitted, which was actually really great. That was a really fun phone call to get that we'd been selected.
I find the grant, and I think a lot of people don't know the hoops that grant writing has to jump through sometimes. I think people, for me at least, before getting involved with the city, I would have said, oh, so you're like just filling out applications all day and maybe doing a follow-up here and there. But no. It's a lot of writing for one.
It's a lot of writing, yeah. It depends on who the agency is that's giving the grant. So a lot of times when it's a foundation like Healthy Babies, they'll kind of just have a general thing that they want you to write about, and you don't necessarily have a template. And this one we had no template, so it was just, hey, give us 3 pages of exactly what you're planning to do. And it may sound like 3 pages is a lot, but 3 pages is actually pretty small to get your entire plan across. But sometimes federal grants can be 30 or 40 pages. So you never know what you're getting.
As someone who went through a grad program for English, 3 pages can be, if you got to take your time with them. To me, one of the worst things in the world is having to write cover letters for a job application.
Yes.
And this just feels like that turned up to 11.
Yes.
Wonderful. But it's got to feel like a big win whenever you get that, hey, you're going to get this money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's huge. I mean, that is a fantastic phone call to get. And they call you and you're trying not to sound too excited, but at the same time, you want to be like, scream and yell. So it's pretty fun.
Do you ever get like a big, do they ever bring in the like clearinghouse big check?
That would be awesome, but no. At least not A1C. We should get that for the next one.
We're going to have to get one.
Yeah, love
Special
it.
order.
Put it up on our wall.
Yeah.
It's going to be my office decor.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's right.
So
Will individuals actually be sent into the daycare setting or into schools or to share this message? How will that work exactly?
So, little background. In 1991 is when the lead and copper rule came out.
Okay.
It was part of the Safe Drinking Water Act rule from 1974, I believe. And this Flint, Michigan, you mentioned earlier, really set things in motion back in 2016. So they started a major overhaul of the lead and copper rule. So that's where we get the LCR, lead and copper rule revision. Mm-hmm. So the new rule is very heavy in education and outreach for public school systems and daycares, which it wasn't in the past. Typically, everything was just a residential. R1 is where we were mostly focusing on the lead and copper, specifically lead, to remove it. So the answer to your question is we will be going town forums, whatever our means are, to educate the schools and help them along to get the sampling done to make sure our schools are as safe as we are making sure our residents are safe.
So we'll be working closely with CMCSS on this.
Absolutely. And daycares as well.
Mm-hmm. As far as then, of course, I'm sure parents of students, guardians, I suppose, are going to be very interested in the communications from this. Probably they'll be getting some emails from CMCSS at some point, I would think.
I would imagine. Yeah. Like I said, we will have some meetings with the leaders of the Clarksville Montgomery County school system and educate them in the process of sampling and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sure they will be in touch with the parents and students. And I guarantee you there's going to be some interest raised at that point. Yeah.
Oh, sure. To that end, you mentioned testing. What does the testing process look like? Like, what's actually happening?
So, the way it is now, for you, if I was going to test your home, I would send you a liter sample bottle. You would collect that sample for me. I would come get it, and then after we collect all of our samples, that would be representative of our lead and copper distribution in the system. It's sent off to a third-party private lab. The results are then returned to us and then relayed to the customer.
How do you know how far up the channel it is then? If I'm drawing water from a spigot, how far up the line can it catch lead readings? Like, is it going to be the water main at the end of my street, or is it going to go to the end of the road?
The typical transmission for lead is in your service line.
Okay.
So it would be from the main to your house. The mains themselves, while some are galvanized, which will fall under this rule, mostly what we're looking at are service lines. So we can do that by the age of the home.
Okay.
So post 1986, you weren't allowed to have solder or lead pipe in a home in construction. The city of Clarksville was 1988 and getting that implemented. So that's why Chris mentioned we're going from 88 forward to remove anything, or excuse me, 88 back to make sure that all of the lead and all of the galvanized are removed.
It's really, I can't help but notice also neighborhood and community services. We talked with Levon Bracey and Michelle Klein just recently about their lead safe housing program. It seems like lead's on a lot of minds as far as like health and safety organizations just in the past year or so. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, really it comes down to this, but a lot of it also comes down to funding. So the infrastructure bill that was passed, a lot of the money that comes to cities to be able to do this will be coming in the next year from the infrastructure bill that Congress had passed. I believe it was November of 2021. And now there's also the sustainability and resiliency bill that was passed recently. That also has additional money in it. And I think that was March of 2022 that one went through. So it takes a little while for the money to actually get appointed to the correct divisions, which in this case is probably going to be the EPA. And then that'll come through. So you'll see a lot of cities, state governments preparing, especially community housing. Everybody's getting ready to basically help mediate the lead that's either in paint or in pipes. But we also have the water the act that we're on too. So,
Chris, before I came and joined the city family, I recall that we all sat down around the table when I was still with the Lead Chronicle, and we talked about some of the pretty aggressive efforts that were going to be happening.
Yes.
Can you remind me of some of that?
So, actually, some of the galvanized work or lead removal was started back in 15. The city was gas and water operations realized that this was coming. So, 15, it started removing those. Lost my thought.
Lead service.
Yeah, that's lead services.
So we're a little ahead of the game.
And actually, way before that, the internal policy was that if they saw one, it wasn't repaired years ago, back in the 80s. They said, if you see one, replace it. And they would replace it with copper.
Well, that's good. So that puts us a little ahead of where we might be otherwise.
Right.
Not a little. It sounds like more like a lot. Yeah. Very cool. I talking about the testing and stuff. I always find we were talking with wastewater just last week, and something that always astounds me that I don't think, and if you're listening to this, you heard me say this a week ago, the level of science that goes into all this fascinates me. Just the level of chemistry, and with wastewater, you add in biology as well. Just, I don't think people fully understand sometimes just the complexity of making sure we have high quality drinking water without contaminants in it.
You're correct. They don't.
Absolutely.
And to that end, we have like scientists, chemists on gas and water staff, right?
We have yes, we have professionals in place. We have in the lab, in operations, and like Chris said, in construction, everywhere. But specifically speaking of the lab, we have 3 lab technicians that's all they do. They go out and they collect bacteriological samples, they collect chemical samples, they collect samples that will be sent off to third-party labs. So, yes, very much so.
I believe the new facility that's being built will have a lab on it as well, right?
We'll have 3 labs.
That's awesome. What'll be happening in those spaces?
So currently, Philip, at the plant, the South plant, they have a bacteriological lab and a chemical lab. Which is what we run our dailies and that are required, and our monthlies and bacterial dailies and weeklies. The North plant will have an additional lab. It'll be a VOC lab, volatile organic carbons, and possibly atomic absorption. And those are specifically looking at constituents that are coming out, even like in our UCMR5. We'll be able to look at those constituents in-house. We're employing a new technology at the North plant, an additional technology treatment process. It's called GAC. In that GAC, we will watch the water going in on the front side of the GAC and the water coming off the backside, and we'll be able to run tests inside and do research how effective it is.
It's awesome.
It's just, you've got guys that speak totally different languages. I know. I feel like the other day I felt like I was in chemistry class.
Yeah.
I just sit here and nod like that's cool. I studied books.
Well,
I know a lot about Shakespeare.
Philip said, how did we end up here? I mean, we just ended up here. I mean, I was working as a mechanic across the street from City Hall in the town I lived in, and I walked across the street and asked the director of utilities, could I have a job? And I've been in it 30 years. Wow. I mean, that's how I started in the gas system and streets. So
how have things changed in that time? I feel like the standards have gone, and I mean, needs change too. Like our world is changing, whether you are talking about climate changes or just changes to the environment. I'm sure that has a huge effect on the needs for
wheels around now. We don't write on stone tablets.
So I'll say this: years ago, you had charts that we had to keep up with every week or every day, every 24 hours, and they ran in a circle. And they were paper charts, and they had these little pens. You had to go in, you had to check them every day and note them and all that. Well, we've come a long way from there. Now we have it all on computer. So
that was going to be my comment. Was for lay purposes, if you look at when you were in school, you took a notepad and a pen to school. Now our students take computers to class. The same thing is evolving in water, where we used to do everything. All of it was handwritten, where it's all computer now. Anything, a test that we would have to physically collect a sample and put into an instrument now can be online. Filtration systems have changed dramatically. We don't just use earthen materials. We use plastics and pumps and membrane, ultra, reverse osmosis. So it just like anything else, the world we live in today, the technology has ramped really in the last decade, has so in the water industry as well.
It's fascinating. Is there a particular advancement or piece of tech that was just really exciting to you in recent years? Or
oh gosh, yeah, probably for me it would be our filtration system now. I mentioned before, and don't get me wrong, dual media filters, the traditional, they're great. They still work wonderfully. We use a membrane filtration, a hollow fiber, low pressure membrane, where we actually use a pump to force the filter through tiny little holes in these plastic straws. It's very hard to visualize. It almost takes a plant tour to really understand that. But that filtration is a direct barrier. Nothing can pass through that barrier that could make you sick. And so that, to me, is technology that is pretty neat. It's pretty.
And to that point, how many nights years ago, even though the filters were great, how many nights did we not sleep thinking about turbidity?
Yeah.
And now we have a direct barrier to turbidity and down to 0.1 micron.
What does turbidity mean?
Clarity of water.
Oh,
okay.
So
that's fascinating. A lot of that went over my head, but it sounds really cool.
yeah. We'd love to show you. And we give tours all the time.
Yeah, to that end, I was recently out at the new plant site, and it's coming along real nice. And that's been months ago. I can't imagine what it looks like now, but it's really exciting to see it all come together for sure.
It's coming out of the ground. We still have about 2 years.
Awesome.
$212 million, I believe it is.
I think we bid it. Yeah, that's what the bid came in at. You're correct. Okay.
And really increases our capacity for future proofing for a long time.
Yep.
That's awesome. Do we know something? Someone asked me recently. Once it is done, they asked. I'm trying to think how they put it. They were asking. That seems like a really good opportunity to maybe give the current plant a break and do some work on it. Is that a thing?
Well, at the current rate we're growing, we hope that we'll be able to slow that one down and bring this one up and give that one a little bit of rest on the max out of flow rates like we're hitting currently. But she'll still have to do her job. We have to maintain her.
Got it.
What I say to people that ask that question is, you have a vehicle and the speedometer says 120. Do you drive 120 everywhere you go? No, you don't. Same's true for a water plant. Just because I can produce 30 million gallons a day doesn't mean I need to produce 30 million gallons. There's actually rules in place that once you reach 85% of that mark on your average, you have to do what we're currently doing, which is build a new facility. That's
or
correct.
Upgrade or build a new. Yeah, add more capacity.
Yeah.
Right.
And that comes from the our state regulations through TDEC.
Fascinating. I guess back to healthy babies here. With this program, we've talked about testing and finding the need. Once the need is found, what is that going to look like for mitigation or for making the improvements?
So, if you want to answer, go ahead. It's fine.
It all goes back to the new rule. And what we will do is mitigation. That is what the rule states. The rule is designed to remove all lead. Okay. So if we go into a home and we find that, or to a daycare for the healthy babies, then we will work with that business owner and we will help them mitigate the lead, whether it be a lead service on their side or internal plumbing or anything like that. So we will go in, we will explain what the situation is, we will go over the sampling, how to do the collection, and then work them through that process. But the ultimate goal for your question is to remove it, be zero.
Is there? Go ahead, Carly.
I was just going to say, however, that might not be financially helping them. We'll help them through the process. The city gas and water, we only own to the meter. Everything past the meter, that's private property. It actually belongs to either the daycare or the homeowner. And so that's something that, we'll look at through our process. It's definitely something we want to be able to give anyone that does have lead in their home, resources that they can go to, obviously, to address that, whether it be mitigation of putting in filters or if, the extreme would be to replace all the piping in their house.
Awesome. Interesting. So our end, this grant will largely go towards that identification side of things.
Yeah, this part really is the communication side and setting up that very initial step, which is huge. Obviously, we want to be able to make that connection. And then the next step will be, once we have all our communication materials, this will even include outreach materials and what we put on the website and setting up the phone number. So, when the general public has questions, Gas and Water is actually going to have a number that they can specifically call that will be just for the lead service line.
Gotcha. And by the time this releases, I bet that some of those things will be in place. So if they are, I'll say this, if they are in place,
yes.
Just check in the description. I'll make sure those links are added.
And if they're not up, if the specific number isn't up, you can still call Gas and Water, and we will be more than happy to help you with any questions you have.
Back to the proactive thing, the rule officially becomes a rule, and we have to be in compliance. October 16th of 24.
When we're talking about a rule, this is where we're talking about like a federal guideline type of rule. I know rule is a pretty specific term when talking about federal guidelines, and
Lead and copper rule revision, LCRR.
Got it.
Is what we're dealing with.
so if people want to look up the exact language, they can look up LCRR. I did a whole thing on looking up like how a rule is put in place and what that specifically means, and it's really fascinating if you're into like the government side of things, that bureaucratic side. It's so complex.
Anybody that listens to the podcast can go to the Gas and Water site, go to the city's webpage, go to the Gas and Water section of that, and there are clickable links that will take them directly to the lead and copper rules.
And they should be done. We're updating the website now. That should be done by when this podcast comes out.
Awesome. And I know we've been talking a lot about lead. We talked about this with, again, community and neighborhood and community services as well. We talked a lot about that lead can be harmful, and that's obvious, I think. But for those wondering, I had to do some research into this. There's specifically, I believe it's can cause headaches, irritability. It's not good.
Yeah, it's definitely not good. There's There's a lot of, especially going back to the youth. So, and really focusing on 6 and younger, but things like attention deficit disorder, it can increase the symptoms of that. It usually shows up in schooling. The children have a hard time paying attention. They have a hard time focusing on their studies. So it's definitely something that they'll notice that there's something there. And I will say, if there's ever a question on, lead poisoning, if anybody, it's through a blood test. That's how you can tell if there's something.
I will say this, Philip, you want to expound on our lead levels leaving the plant and our...
That's a good point,
history.
Yeah. So our source water, the Cumberland River, no lead is to speak of. If there is trace amounts. The action level for lead is 15 parts per billion. Like I said, I've been at the water treatment plant out there for about 29 years, and we sample under the current rule. The rule was established in 1991. We test every 3 years, and we've never had an action level.
Action level meaning where we have to do something.
That is correct. Okay. That is correct. That doesn't mean we haven't been doing things along the way to mitigate the lead service, like Chris said. If we ever came across one in normal construction, we went ahead and replaced it, no questions asked. The previous rule had us remove 7% of your known lead per year. This current rule, or the new rule, the revision increases that to 10% per year. So,
Okay.
What if understanding that lead, and at least in our community, by and large in most places, is perhaps on the lower end of concerns, what are some of the things that, in just environmentally speaking, we do have, like that you guys do have to watch out for here, that are on that sort of list of?
So every 5 years, the EPA comes out with what they call an uncontaminated or unregulated contaminant list. And we have to, by rule, sample for those things. We sample again for UCMR 5 starting in December of 2024. And what that does is they take constituents that they found to be harmful, whether it be carcinogen or whatever. It's just an adverse health effect. Then large and small systems have to sample for those, and then they detect what levels they are. If there is a level high enough and enough of those samples taken, then they will put it on the contaminant list and then have plants start to remove them.
Okay.
So the answer to your question right now, the big one on everybody's heads lights are the PFAS and PFOAs. If you heard the Camp Lejeune commercials that have been going around, that's kind of where that is.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
Yeah.
They're also referred to as forever chemicals.
Yes.
Gen X type things. So
yeah, pharmaceuticals.
Yep.
Anything and everything.
And this is why it's important, listeners, to properly dispose of such things, because they can end up in the water.
That is correct.
Yeah, it's our precious resource that we only get so much of on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Once it's contaminated,
not a lot to do.
Yeah, so 95% of the Earth is covered in water. 5% of that is fresh. 1% of that is available for drinking water. So
I didn't know it was that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
The other 4% is taken up in the ice caps.
Fascinating.
Various groups have speculated about mercury. Can you speak to that?
Yes, mercury is on the list. It's on reduced monitoring for us because we don't have a problem with mercury in the Cumberland River. That's one thing I would like to say to the citizens, the customers, that they are very fortunate to live where we live and to be on the Cumberland River as a source. It's very clean. It gets a bad rap. It's had all the nicknames, which I'm not going to repeat right now. But it is an easy source to treat. It's very stable. It's very consistent, low in organic matter. So it's from an operator standpoint, it's fantastic to treat. And from a ratepayer or customer standpoint, be very fortunate to know that they have such a high quality and abundant source in the Cumberland River.
Awesome.
Which to the customer, it even makes them see it on their bill, because we don't have to continue, fight that source of treatment and employ more and more operations.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, great stuff. Sorry, I did the same thing. I was like, where am I going now? This is one I don't know if we want to talk about, but I have, just as a for instance of that, also we have when accidents happen, or in particular, we had something on the Ohio River not too long ago. I was actually talking with Mark Riggins a little while back, and I didn't realize that we flow the opposite way from that. So we were like completely good.
That's correct.
In that regard. But do we? It did get me thinking about sort of the emergency response. If we do we have like plans for if something like that were to come up?
So we have an ERP, emergency response plan, for these situations, and we're required to keep a source water protection plan up to date. So we know so far upriver all of our possible and potential contaminants, and we have to report that back to the state. We do a windshield once a year, and what is that, every three?
Every 3.
Yeah. So we are constantly looking for that source water and that protection of that, and trying to assess what may impact our ability to treat.
Fascinating. Yeah, I know just water quality has been a lot on people's minds lately, and it is just good to talk with y'all and reiterate that we're on it, that Gas and Water has the best people that know what they're doing, and you can rest easy here in Clarksville.
Absolutely. We have a wonderful staff, dedicated, very knowledgeable in what they do. So, yes, the ratepayers can rest easy.
Wonderful.
Yeah. You could keep this or not, but I was talking to one of the operators just the other day, and he told me, he said, Chris, my only concern is, he said, I never want to make someone sick. And that's the passion we have in our group.
That's one.
It's good to have people that think about that. I know with me, working, and it's such a smaller thing, but to me, it was always a big deal to me. I don't want to say that someone said something that they didn't, or put someone in a bad situation because of the way I wrote about them. And that's not, take that, and then health issues to me are so much bigger. And it's good to know that we have people that are conscientious about such things.
We're running our operators on staff 24 hours a day, and they're rotating shifts, 12-hour shifts. And those operators have the ability, not necessarily have the ability, but it could happen if they weren't doing their job, and we didn't have the computer and the technology in place to watch that. We have 224,000 people here now. They affect that many souls all the time. And that's the passion that is in us, Philip and I and the rest of the water division.
Yeah, so no pressure.
No, not at all.
Well, hopefully the correct amount of pressure.
We're always above 20.
To speak to their dedication, fortunately, we haven't had any sort of catastrophe like folks in Ohio have, but we did have COVID. And so when everybody else was locked down in their homes, our operators were quarantined for the water plant.
I remember that.
Yeah. So they actually lived there for 2 months.
Goodness, I didn't know that.
Yeah. They did. They were able to rotate out every 14 days. And so, but yeah, that's the level of dedication that these folks had. They actually lived there.
Because it's a matter of security. You wanted to make sure you had somebody there who was not sick.
Exactly.
Who was operating that system. I get that.
And we quarantined them basically so that we knew that they were healthy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. So I don't really have any more questions. Is there anything anyone would like to add?
I just have one thing I'd like to say. Carly, since you've been here, you've sort of championed awareness of a whole myriad range of environmental issues. And of course, the green certification program that we all know about was tremendous. And now this with the healthy baby. So I think that needs to be saluted. And I just want to say that for the record.
Thank you.
You've really brought a whole range of awareness to Clarksville for a wide variety of environmental threats, if you will.
Absolutely.
And just keeping us aware of everything that we need to know. So great.
On that note, I will say she is currently also working on another grant for us that will mean the world to the. I'm going to keep it under my hat right now.
I was about to say, how much can we?
Yeah, to the ratepayers. It's huge. It's
wonderful.
It's
love
great.
to hear it.
So.
More power to the grant writers. I think it's something that can fly under the radar for the average person. But talking with Carly, and talking with Lauren and the other
Lauren
grant
Winters.
writers, Lauren Winters in particular, I'm always just the level of tenacity that it takes and the ability to just keep the pressure and go and find these opportunities and bring them back home. Between this and hearing about this dredging project over on the Red River Trailhead, or adult changing tables at some of our parks, or just all these amazing things, these amazing wins that our grant writers are bringing to town. And it's really cool.
Yeah.
And you guys deserve way more of a shout out.
The city has a great group of grant writers. So there's I think there's 5 of us.
I think we're looking for one more too now,
yeah.
by the way.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But awesome. Yeah. Anything else? Do we want to add anything in here? Any announcements? Anything we want to volunteer Mark Riggins for?
No.
I know he's got a lot on his plate at the moment. He's helping out the street department for a little bit too. So
I will say that it's I don't know. I was gonna say Mark is very much like Chris and I and Carly. I'm sure we came up through the trenches in our current careers, and to have a general manager that followed that same path. Not that the ones in the past haven't done a good job, but it's
we got a good team.
We've got a great team, and when it's somebody that knows what the lowest person on the totem pole, if you will, is going through, to the highest person, it means a great difference to the department as a whole.
Very cool. Well, again, just thank you guys for coming out. This has been a great discussion. I'm really excited about this project. I'm excited about the upcoming new North Clarksville facility. There's just a lot of cool stuff happening right now at Gas and Water and with just Clarksville in general, but it's been great to learn a little bit more about it. So thank you all. I'll make sure to tag in any information pertaining to what we've talked about in the descriptions. So listeners, if you're interested in any of this, take a look at those links and learn a little bit more about what we're doing to make Clarksville just a little bit better every day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.